Yeah, well, no, yeah, on a new, yeah.
Hello, this is Ryan Riccatelli with asnews.net and the Kiteboarder magazine, and this is show number 70. This week I've got Dave Loop on the line. Dave is he's been involved in kiteboarding since I think we started kiteboarding on the East Coast, and he's based in Dewey Beach, Delaware, and I would consider you a pioneer of the Northeast, and even, I'd say, the whole eastern seaboard. So, Dave, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and some of the things you've done?
Yeah, kiting was fun for me, because like you were saying, I was working for Naish as a windsurfing rep. I'd come out of the retail industry, being in shops, and snowboarding, windsurfing, skate, all that stuff. And I just got tired of it. After about 9 years, I finally said, hey, I want to do something else. And an opportunity came up, and Andy Church out at Naish, said, hey, Luke, you want to try this? And I said, sure. So I went on the road. First year, had a really good time. No idea kiting was even coming along. We just seen a few guys doing it. So basically, all of a sudden, it was thrown on us at Naish, and we were like, wow, what are we going to do with this? And it ended up being just a life-changing experience. It was pretty cool.
Well, and you had an RV, and you probably still have the same RV, but you've traveled miles and kited all over the East Coast. And why don't you talk a little bit about that, pioneering the East Coast and exploring all the new spots and setting up all the new dealers and kind of watching the sport grow?
What really happened with the RV was kind of a funny situation because when I first got into repping's one of these things where you're going out, you're trying to show a product line, you want to go out and you want to do it right, and I figured there were so many reps out at the time in that in that day and age that I had to come in big and do it right and be really prepared. And so I went out and first got a 4-wheel drive van with a big trailer and just made my presentation really nice, and it went from there. It's pretty amazing what a little thought will do, putting it into something like that. And went out and hit the rep. The first year I think I drove, I don't know, probably 50,000 miles the first year on the road. But when kiting started, it was one of these things where we didn't know, just like the first couple of years, nobody really knew what they were doing. We got our kites. Peter Arpeg, who was my sales manager at Naish, had them shipped in. We took them out. We flew at the sandbar one night, and that scared the hell out of ourselves. And then we're like, whoa, this is cool. Then about 2 weeks later, we went out to Maui and actually learned how to kite, which is when it all started changing.
And this is back in the two-line kite days. Yeah,
this was, the only kites out there at the time were really, Wipika had their two-line kite, and there was Concept Airs, there were some flexi foils and things like that. I think the blades or what, I can't remember what they were anymore. And we had the Naish AR-35, which was really the first kite that Naish came out with. So there was kind of a battle between the foils and the inflatables in the beginning, and it was pretty funny, between us. Some of the guys out that were there at the time, Trip Foreman, at least on the East Coast, Ty Luckett, they were the F1 guys, I was the Naish guy, and you remember that.
Yeah, hey Dave, your vocals are kind of coming in and out, so if you can just remember to speak directly into the phone, it'll help a little bit. It tends to happen, I don't know what it is, I think it's just could be my phone line as well, and the speakerphone and the whole nature of this, so... those were the days, man. With Trip Foreman, I can still see and picture Trip Foreman hanging on to this long broomstick, two-line F1 foil, jumping. I mean, those are the days. And also, you had a cohort too, which was Neil Hutchinson. And talk a little bit about your relationship with him.
Yeah, Neil was one of the deals where I went to Florida, and I was just driving around randomly visiting shops, and I met Neil. And, we hit it off. There was a bunch of guys that were just getting into kiting. And we went out and had a great time. As you know, in Fort Lauderdale, it can get out of hand and be a lot of fun at the same time. So we hooked off in a good relationship. And it's just, kept getting better for years. We stuck together on everything. We do X-rated kiteboarding right now. We're both Slingshot reps. And I think our defining day was really when the AR-5 came out with Naish. We were down in Fort Lauderdale. They shipped us those kites, and it was the first day that all of us went upwind at the same time. I mean, everybody just started going upwind like magic, and that was one of the biggest days of kiting I can ever remember for all of us. We always talk about it. Say, man, you remember that day? All of a sudden, it just happened.
Well, and there, you have a lot of history, or you've watched a lot of riders come up in this sport, and you've seen a lot of the history of this sport, and a lot of people don't realize this, but you have an old, long-time friendship with Lou Wainman, and who's obviously one of the pioneers of our sport. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Well, Lou was funny because Lou worked for me. God, it had to be probably around '95 or so. I don't even remember when we went out to Maui, but when I got out there, I ran into Lou, and it just shocked the hell out of me. He was kiting, and Lou had worked at our shop probably, I'd say, about 6 months or 7 months. He was a real funny guy. He was very intense. He loved working on things. He loved he loved to break everything that he rode, which was hilarious. So we had a lot of fun with him. But when I went out to Maui and saw him ride, I was like, oh my God! I mean, he just tore it up. And a few years later, I think it was at Glassmasters when you and I were there. Lou came up to me and handed me $80. I'm like, what's this for? He goes, it's for a pair of shoes I forgot to pay for at the shop. It's been killing me for this long.
Well, that's
he's
Lou.
A character, man.
Yeah, Lou's definitely a character. He definitely marches to his own drum.
Yeah.
And, obviously, where you're at, why don't you talk a little bit about, like, what it's like, in Delaware, and I mean, that, you are one of the key guys up there, and there's a few others up there, and I'm sorry for those that listen to the show that I've missed, but I mean, you're one of the main guys up there who really, pioneered those local areas.
Yeah, when I was running around in the beginning, you'd go out to shops, and you had to teach every single shop. All their employees, whoever was on the staff, or the people they were going to have kiting, had a kite. I mean, so, those first 2-3 years, all you were doing was a clinic, one after another. And, as you finally started to fill some of these pockets and had a rider start to ride, that's where it started to blossom. But in the very early days of that, it was tough to try and go up the entire coast and try and teach every single shop, or somebody in the shop had a kite, especially in the beginning when we really didn't know how to teach. So, you know what that was like. I mean, it's a little bit tricky.
Well, and the gear has progressed so much, and
Yeah.
and obviously with kiting, with all the new brands and stuff. I mean, you've watched like a lot of the different brands break off into new brands, and all how the equipment's evolved, and coming from your perspective, I mean, you've watched from two-line kites to now. I mean, what do you think about, like, obviously teaching someone from back then to teaching somebody now?
I don't know. You always have people, you're going to have some person in the lesson that comes in that just gets it right away. They just have a natural talent. I didn't find it that much harder to teach back then as I do now. It was just a different style of teaching. I think now, with D-Power, with all these different things going on a kite, there's a little more confusion. Back then, you take somebody out, and they did a body drag, they did another body drag, they did another body drag until they finally had a good concept of what's going on with the kite. It was fairly easy to relaunch. I think, the two-line kites pretty much came up fairly easily. But there's a lot more going on with kites nowadays. When you're teaching a lesson, you're showing a lot more stuff than you did back then. So, in an average lesson, I think I can get somebody out usually within 3 hours. They're up and riding. They may not be doing great, but they're up having a good time. I don't think that's changed much really from back when I used to teach people. They pretty much, as long as they had some aptitude and some board skills with it, they were able to get up.
Well, and I guess, with that said, too, is like, you make a good point that the gear is obviously a lot more complicated, and you're absolutely right. Sometimes I think teaching on some of the old two-line kites, if you lived in enough wind in a wind area, I mean, it was easy to get someone up and going on a two-line kite. It was so simple for them, and now, we have these, four-line SLE kites with 100% D-Power. We've got all these clips and bells and whistles, and it's just, it has overcomplicated things, but in terms of the safety aspects, obviously it's a little bit, you don't cringe as much when you hand off one of these kites. It's like, all right, let go.
Oh, I still cringe.
So do I sometimes, but I think that's just the nature of kiteboarding. Well, let's get on to some other stuff too. I mean, a lot of people don't realize it, but you're like one of the major, like, instigators and promoters of the first, kiteboarding contests on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And isn't that where H2 Air came from, the name?
H2 Air actually came from an idea that Peter Arpeg had about doing a kite culture type fest thing. Then he came up with his name, H2 Air, and he said, why don't you use that? Well, little did I know, about 2 months later, Chris Gilbert called me up, was kind of PO'd that I used the name. It was supposedly his. So that's actually how the name H2 Air came about. I was pretty embarrassed about it, but at that point in time, I had invested so much money into it, I couldn't really worry about it anymore.
Yeah, and I remember seeing photos of these contests that you guys would have on the East Coast, and Neil Hutchinson would be there, and all these people, and I mean, this is back when Neil Hutchinson called himself a professional kiteboarder.
Yeah, we did have the biggest, largest parties, I think. I had Jeff Lagos from Slingshot out here one time for a party, and he basically said, man, you just blew away all the Slingshot parties that we've had. I mean, we've had some just crazy vendors. That's always kind of been my trademark. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So those parties were pretty good.
Yeah, and I can attest to that, because I've been there a few times where on maybe the final day of the contest, you've been MIA. Like, you didn't...
About every one of those.
Yeah, but it actually, I've been actually, you and I, we've done some traveling. I've seen you all over the place, and I remember we did a trip up the East Coast, and we went up from North Carolina, and I think you ended up in Delaware. I continued up to Boston, but we had a great trip, and the coolest thing about traveling with you is that you just knew everybody, you knew every spot, you took us right where we needed to go. I was working for another magazine at that time, and, how have you seen kiteboarding change since then? I mean, obviously, at that time, we felt like we were pioneering it, and we weren't pioneering it because you had already done all the hard work, but I mean, from now to back then, like, how much growth has there been on the East Coast?
Oh, there's a lot. It's funny when you look back then, because like you said, there were just a core group of people. I remember the Barnegat Light Contest was one of the first contests that I did that really came together with the guys up in at Island Surf and Sail. And that contest, the only entrance and basically the only people there, I think, was Dimitri Maramudas, Jason Slezak, Gary Mank, Tripp, Ty, myself, Skater, like all these guys. We were the only kiteboarders.
Skater. What happened to Skater?
Yeah, so you had this little group of guys, and we were really all the ones that were the core of it. If you look at that whole little core group of guys, one of us is in a different company across the industry right now doing something for somebody. So that was really the sprout of it all, and it started to grow and grow, and obviously now it's getting bigger. The news groups, forums, things like that have really changed the way everything works. I mean, like, if you have a product go bad, everybody knows about it in like 30 minutes.
Which is never good.
Yeah, so it's definitely changed. I mean, there's a lot of people now getting into it. What I've found is that I've had to really watch when we have people come in to take lessons and things. We get people that come in that are making the choice of, hey, maybe I'll play putt-putt golf today, or ride a go-kart, or maybe I'll take a kiteboarding lesson. So the masses are coming at us now, and it's like you get people that come in for lessons that really have no interest in even getting into kiting. They just want a rodeo ride.
Yeah, and that's obviously that is a huge difference than in the past, because before is like, I mean, I remember when I started kiteboarding, there wasn't any schools. Actually, you had to go to Maui to go get a lesson from somebody. So we had to like strong arm ourselves, and it's the same. We experienced the same thing down here. But you mentioned a lot of names. I mean, Trip Foreman, real kiteboarding. Neil Hutchinson, X-rated kiteboarding. He's gone on to do races and all kinds of stuff. Ty Luckett. What's Ty doing these days?
Ty is school in Hatteras and down in Florida. He's probably back in Hatteras right now.
And then
Kite Hatteras.
Gary Mank, he works for Cabrina. He's one of the main guys at Adventure Sports, the distributor for North America. And who else did you mention?
Oh, well, up there. Hi.
Skater, that's the guy I want to know. What's up with Skater, man? That's the guy who he always ended up getting hurt or something at every contest.
He had his whole entourage to pick him up when he got hurt. That was some funny stuff, man.
I think the funniest time he got hurt was he had some pains, and Skater, Skater actually he's He's got a big heart. And I remember one time he got some cramps, and somebody told him that if he ate bananas, the potassium would help his cramps. And so the next day he was out there with a case of bananas.
That guy killed me. He was great. But, yeah, he was funny. He's in Vietnam. He goes to Vietnam, I think, for the winter months or something, teaches there. But he's still... I get people that come to my shop that have gone up to Skater's shop, and they're like, man, that guy yells at me.
Yeah, Skater was like a little bit off the scale sometimes. I've heard of that too. And the one thing I got to give him credit for, he's always pioneered the spots before they became the spots. Like, he was down in Brazil, like, when nobody was in Brazil. And I remember him telling me, man, Brazil, and now he's in Vietnam, and it's interesting because he tends to like get to those spots before they're really even established as like true destinations. So
yeah, he's a trooper, man. It's funny to watch that guy because, like you said, he's kind of stealthy. All of a sudden, you run into him somewhere weird.
He got mad at me because I printed his real name one time in an article. He's like, man, you can't do that. I'm like, oh, no. I can't. But anyway. Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about, you came down to the Island Rod Invitational when that was in its heyday as well. And that was a huge party down there. And, I know you actually pulled out this whole contraption, and you had this projector with lights, and you had are you still doing stuff like that? Yeah, I'm doing it, actually, Saturday down at Real Kiteboarding. They're doing their grand opening they do every year to kick off the season, and I'll have all the lights, all the PA systems, smoke machines, everything. When I go out and do the stuff, I try to have the video screen set up so we can play some big videos, have some good sound, things like that. So it's just nice, to be able to, when you go somewhere, I like to have everything. I don't like to have to rent it or screw around with something. I just want to have it all ready to go. People love that. They walk in and boom, you got a show. Well, and Dave Loop is synonymous with Spunky Loop. That's
right. My wife is somewhere running around the house right now. Yeah, Spunky's been actually, I wouldn't be in this if it wasn't for her, because she's the one that said, go out and do it. She said, actually, how I got into this was funny, because she just said, go drive to all the other shops and see what's up on the East Coast. So I took off, in my car, went to a bunch of shops, then called up Andy Church and said, here's what's wrong with your shops, and that's why you're not selling a lot of Naish right now. And, like 3 weeks later, said, you're hired.
Yeah, well, and Spunky's awesome, and for those of you who know her, who listen to the show, I know you'll agree, and if for those of you who don't know her, Spunky is kind of like the person who, if you're at a contest or you're at an event, she'll just make sure you're having a good time.
Yeah.
She's just always positive, and she's always been a huge, huge advocate and supporter of kiteboarders and kiteboarding. And you got to tell her I said hello, because I miss her, because I don't get out like I used to. I used to be on the road 24/7, and it was always great to see her, because it was just a familiar face who was always she took care of me, man.
Yeah. Hey, I tell you what, I get as many phone calls for her as I do for me from the people in the industry. Everybody wants to talk to her. Every day we get phone calls. So. It's true. We're kind of a team when it comes to it. We're, heading down to Hatteras to do our thing this weekend, and then we'll be back up here, and, we run the shop together. We go on the road together. So it's actually, we do, as she says, we do everything together.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, and you're talking about this Hatteras the Real Kiteboarding grand opening. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what your role is in it?
Yeah, on Saturday, Sunday too, we're going to have some demos going on, products. There'll be prize raffles. Lots of stuff. There's tons of swag laying around, so people come down and do that. Just come down and have a good time. We're going to have a party Saturday night at Mac Daddy's, I believe it is. And it's always a good time down there. We come down and everybody gets together. Hopefully it's going to be good riding this week. It's supposed to be warm. I don't know what the forecast is yet, but it should be. I think it's going to be a great weekend. We've been doing that with them for quite a while. I have an event with them every year. Actually 3 times a year I usually do something with them. So this one should be good also, and hopefully we'll have really good.
Hey, Dave, I'm kind of losing you. You're kind of fading out again, so I believe it's probably just the nature of the cell phone. Another question I have is, like, obviously we put out with the press release this really old-school photo of you from back in the day during your glam days. So, tell us a little bit about that and what the big hair and the spandex was about.
Well, it was leather, man. Come on.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
That was after spandex. I wore that before. Now, just from back in the day, when I started playing in bands when I was like a little kid, like 12 or so, and I've been always playing in bands for a long time. That just happened to be one of the ones. Screams of Pain was Washington D.C.'s only original sex rock band, and all we did was play songs about sex. Songs like, well, I won't say that. One was called Babylon Pink, another one's called Fuck Me Pumps, it's like that. But so some crazy stuff, but we had interesting crowds, and that was just one of the funnier bands I was in, but there were a lot of them.
And I can remember hanging out with you, and you pull out the electric guitar and start jamming, and it's not a joke. I mean, you can really play the guitar. It's like you can play like a true rock star on the guitar.
There's been lots of times, you guys, late at night. I mean, I think you were down there for one of the Hazardous events. We were one of the Halloween things I think we did. I pulled out the guitar, and pretty soon the entire house, everybody was going crazy. We had the drum sets there, and the bass. We had the whole place just rigged. Yeah,
Dave, that's the one thing I totally remember about you and traveling with you is when the guitar came out, and also, too, you would even sometimes just jam riffs, and I wouldn't even know it was, I thought the radio was playing and you're playing, and actually, some of your music, you've used some of your music in some videos, in some of, like, the video clips. Or actually, I've heard your music in video clips before, and then I found out later that it was you.
It shows up every once in a while, so it's kind of funny, but it's a passion. I mean, before it was a business, and it got to be one of these businesses where I just felt like I was chasing my tail. But it's a lot of fun. So I'd rather play to have fun than go out and bust my ass to make a living doing it.
Well, and I know you're the Slingshot rep, and everyone who listens to the show, they love to hear about gear. So why don't you give me your feedback on the Turbo Diesel 2, the T2?
T2 is going to sell like crazy. It's a fun kite. I was on the 9 today. It's got a lot of pop. It's very easy to ride. It's one of these kites you pull out of the bag. Today I pulled a brand new one out of the bag, hands down, rigged it up, went out and rode it, and had a blast. That's the way a kite should be. The safety system looks good on it. It works well. Kite's just, aesthetically it looks great. I think it's going to be a hit this year. Actually, I will bank on it because that's how I make my living.
Well,
I think out of the boat kites that I've ridden, and obviously in my shop I sell a lot of different kites. It's got the best balance when you put all the different aspects together, whether it be D-power, pop, handling, all these things. Today from riding, I was really, really impressed with that kite. So.
How does it compare to the Link?
The Link needs a lot more wind, and the Link needs to be much more balanced on the bridles. As you guys, everybody knew we had a problem with some of the bridles with that kite. There were a lot of Links out there that handled very bad, and it was a bridle problem. There's a lot of Links out there that are really nice, and once you get them tuned up right, they're actually a great kite. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there don't really understand tuning kites. Basically when your kite, you're sheeting in and you're sheeting out. They don't know that balance point when a kite starts to go backwards or go forward on them. And if you don't know that, and you're trying to set up a link, you're going to have a problem doing it because you need to know where that center balance line is. Once you get that, the kite gets dialed in. It's a really nice kite.
Well, and what if obviously, like I said, everyone listens to the show, and they always want to kind of figure out the gear, and you're the guy who sells the gear, so you're kind of like the worst person to talk to because in a sense you're selling the gear. But from just a direct rider's feedback, like what kind of rider do you think that the Turbo Diesel 2 is for versus like what the Link is for, or what type of rider the Link is for?
I think the turbo is going to work. It's going to work well on both ends. Today, obviously, I'm not a great rider. I don't get enough time on the water. I'm usually out teaching people or in the store or riding around on the road trying to get somewhere. The kite's very easy to fly. It's very stable. You don't have to worry about it flying over your head or falling backwards, anything like that. I think anybody from beginner to expert can ride this kite. It was fun to jump unhooked. Scott actually surprised me being unhooked today. I was like, crazy. With the amount of power it draws, I was really surprised at how much V-power it had. But the Link, on the other hand, needs quite a bit of wind to ride. You had to have that kite, pretty lit up, I think, to ride. I think most people did. This one here is effortless. In a little bit of wind, you're going to be able to go very easily.
You know what, Dave? I'm losing you again, unfortunately. You started fading real bad. So you were talking about the jumpability the T2 versus the Link. What's the bar pressure like versus the Link?
Bar pressure is definitely more. The Link had a very, very light bar pressure, to the point where it's kind of hard to find your kite. When you're riding that kite, it takes, a few days of riding before you actually understand where your kite is, because the bar pressure is so light on the Link. The Turbo 2 definitely has more bar pressure, more input on it. But what I liked about it, it has more of a feel like when you have a sea kite and you pump on your backhand to go for a jump, you get an instant response on it. You feel it right away. You feel the tension. And you can really, you get results. Basically, when you go up there, you get results quickly, and you know what you've done. Whereas I would say the Link took much longer to ride for most people and understand, how to jump it.
What do you think would? There's a guy in the lounge who's asking me this. He says, "What's the best kite for a rookie, the Link or the T2?" And I think you kind of answered that, but I wanted to address his question.
T2 all the way. He'd have no problem.
T2 all the way. And what's your feedback on the fuel?
The fuel's just, that's an awesome kite. It's hands down been an awesome kite for, God, where are we on now? 2007. It's still my favorite kite to ride. When I go out and ride boat kites, I'm still a little bit, they're kind of strange for me because I've ridden fuels for so long. The fuels are the pick of, all our team guys, anybody out there that we go out and, want to get a kite. If I called some guy on my team list, he wants a fuel. That's just like the supercar, everybody wants one. So we've had a lot of people, like I say, especially the team guys, that just stick to those kites. Fortunately, we've had them. I'm scared that we're not going to have them, in 2008, and I'll freak out because that's our meat and potatoes kite.
And what do you think? Okay, there's a lot of people out there who might have bought a Link, and maybe they, like you said, they don't understand the tuning. What's your feedback to helping these guys out to tune up that kite, or maybe even they have a Link and they think it flies great, and they don't realize that with a little tuning it can even fly better.
Basically, you need to get the kite obviously up in the air over your head and figure out where the balance point is. Sometimes I do that by having a kite, and you want it on a steady day when it's blowing, maybe 15 or so. Get your kite up in the air and find out when it starts to back up or when it starts to overshoot your head. And sometimes I'll do that by being hooked in, grabbing my back lines on the pads, and just pulling on the trailing edge a little just to see when it wants to go back or when it wants to go forward. Once you find that sweet spot, it's really easy to adjust. You can get the kite to sit exactly where you want it. Like I said, the kite is a little bit heavier than some of the other kites because it's built, to be really tough. So you need a little bit more wind for it.
Well, I have a little rumor here. It says, rumor is that Dave and Neil Hutchinson will be doing some cat charters next year. What's the deal with that, and how is this year's trip? And I guess these cat charters would be in the BVIs, I guess.
Yeah. The BVIs is, Reel's gone now too, a bunch of people have gone. It's just a magical place. The water's so clear, the lifestyle's so laid back. We went down there basically testing the waters right after the Jupiter contest, just to see what it was like. And it's just amazing. It's so much fun to get on a boat. You take your gear. There's no pressure. It's like, okay, we'll ride here, we'll ride there. It's just a way to get around down there and do it where you're not stuck to one spot. Every day is new, and every experience is new.
Well, and tell us a little bit about the trip that you just went on.
The trip you just went on was, like I said, it was magical. I got down there, and I got lucky on this one, too, because I went down to judge the Jupiter contest for Neil, and he said, hey, David, can you, extend your trip for 8 days? I'm like, well, what are you going to do? He goes, go to BVIs. I'm like, okay. So we got down there. We went to Virgin Gorda. We went to Necker Island. Anegada is a beautiful place. Anegada is very remote. We got over there and got to ride pretty much every side of that island. And there's just so much riding there. You can have flats, you can have chop, you can have waves. You just name it. The conditions are there. The people are nice. There's not a lot on the islands there. When you get into like Anegada, there's just really nothing there. A few restaurants and stuff like that. So it's very laid back. But being on the catamaran, you don't really need that. You can take your dinghy in, go to dinner, come back out, hang out on the cat. So it's a very laid back, not a super partying type trip. It's more of a kind of soul searching type of trip, as I would say.
Well, and I've got a funny question coming in from the lounge, and I don't even know if you can answer this, but someone wants to know what would be the price around to get a kite with some custom graphics put on it? A custom T2 with some custom graphics.
That's tough because you got to build them about 6 months in advance. It can be done, but we literally have to order like 6 months in advance to get it done from Slingshot at least.
I would tell Phantom you just need some spray paint, man. Acrylic spray paint and a good
giant magic markers. Those things work.
Exactly. Well, obviously you were down on that trip that we were just talking about with Neil Hutchinson, and Neil was telling me that it was a dream trip. So it sounds like that's the trip you're probably going to be offering people, and you guys will be. Who's going to serve as the host, and how's that all going to work?
Well, there's different captains, different cooks lined up, different things like that. So it'll rotate. Like I may go down on a trip, Neil may go down on a trip. I doubt that we'd even be able to do it all at the same time, just with the cost of it. But I think for people coming down, we wanted to do it two different ways. Is have our trip where you have everything catered. It's really nice. It's going to cost more, obviously. Or have the bareboat trip where you go down and basically you have to take care of yourself. We'll figure out our grocery list and all that. The biggest hassle we found down there is that everybody's coming in and riding and going back out, and so getting a time together for everybody to eat and do all that stuff is tough on a boat because you have very small space, to do the cooking and all that stuff there. So that was the only tricky part. Everything else was awesome.
Well, and is this going to target more like small groups, or are you going to have individuals that'll be able to buy a spot on it, or how will this work?
Yeah, groups or individuals. I think you're going to find more a group of guys like just want to come down. A family even sometimes. We got families where you have a few people and two families want to come down. But I think it's going to be more groups of people. Say, hey, let 6 of us go down there, and I think we can fit up to 8 to 10 depending on what boat we're running. But it's just a fun way to spend whatever amount of time you want. If you want to do 2 weeks, you can. Most of the trips will probably be 7 days, 8 nights.
What's the season down there?
I think for us, just the way everything's working, we would basically do that between December and mid-March latest. I know Neil wanted to do an April trip, and we decided not to, but I think that's really your season, right? Dead of winter right now, too.
You know what, Dave? You're starting to fade in and out. I'm sorry. I always have to remind everyone to speak up because, like I said, I have this group of people who listen to my show, and if the volume isn't right, I'm getting emails. So, yeah, and obviously, where can people find more information on this?
We'll have it at xratedkiteboarding.com. We'll have more up on that shortly. We're trying to figure out exactly what captains, what boats we can use next year. And we'll start doing that, I would say, December again of next year, kick it off. So we'll start taking deposits, I'd say around May is when we can really have it solidified. So.
Yeah, and Neil is like one of the pioneers of doing this type of trips. I mean, I did one of his trips back in, I think, like 4 years ago before anyone even thought of the BVIs. And he took me on the most incredible trip down there. We stayed at the Bitter End Yacht Club. We had a trimaran. We were kiting all over the place, and it was one of the most memorable trips of my life. Not to mention, if you've ever been on a trip with Neil, just as a host, he's just an incredibly gracious host, and he's just got so much knowledge. And then if you like to party, I mean, Neil's the guy to party with.
There's never a dull moment, that's for sure.
we just got to remind Neil to keep his clothes on.
Yeah, he's got a problem with that.
For sure. Don't be scared though, because he's not an angry drunk by any means. He's a very nice drunk, and he's not even a drunk. That's a bad word for him, but just Neil is just the kind of guy that anybody who has ever met Neil, I've never heard anybody say a bad thing about the guy because he's just so much fun to hang out with. That's just sometimes late at night you'll see him go nuts, but the thing is like at 8 in the morning. He's got a cigarette in his hand and a cup of coffee, and he's spot on. And he may have bloodshot eyes, but the guy just is a machine.
He used to be spot on. I'm starting to see him get a little weathered here lately.
Is he starting to slip?
Said he started to get a little weathered lately. I've seen him actually have a hangover.
Oh, my goodness. I was funny because I did a trip with him down to the Dominican Republic. He flew down. We've both been just so busy the last couple of years, and And so we hadn't had a real chance to have a trip. And so he flew down to come and hang out with me down in the Dominican Republic while I was down there over New Year's. And he shows up and he's wearing like slacks and cowboy boots and a dress-up shirt. And he's got this long hair thing going. And I was like, what the heck are you doing, man? And he just didn't look like the normal Neil that I was used to seeing. But I got used to it. And actually, there's a photo of him in the latest magazine that just came out. And I barely recognized him. So, but yeah, when I got down there, even the guy at the bar was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to order extra cases of Presidente because Neil's coming into town."
They're on the way right now. If you want to hear something funny, there's a contest down in Isla Morada this weekend. I think they're doing a border cross. So Neil rented an RV about the same size as mine, and those guys are on the road right now on the way to Florida, which I can only imagine.
Oh my gosh. That just sounds like trouble.
Yeah, so there's, I think, 8 of them in this RV, which ought to be pretty hysterical. And
they're going down for I think the guys from Triton College, they put together this spring break contest thing. It's down there in Key West. I know Paul Menta they're working with Paul Menta to do it, and it sounds like it's going to be a really incredible time. But Neil called me up like a couple weeks ago, and he's like, "Yeah, man, I got to help these kids out." And I was like, "Yeah, right, you got to help these kids out." He sees an opportunity to go and hang out and party, and he's there.
Basically it. But you know what? It's funny how hard Neil's in the same situation I am. He has a shop called Tiki Beach, where he does lessons. He sells some gear there, and I'm also a retailer and a rep, which is really a difficult thing to do at the same time. In the beginning, for both of us, Neil's kind of been my sounding board for things, and I've been his. And, when I first went out and opened this shop, it was kind of a weird thing, because dealers are freaking out going, "Hey, now Loop's going to be getting kites cheaper than us or something because I'm with Slingshot." And it wasn't the case, and I had to prove that to both the dealers and my company. So Neil has just gone through the same thing. And what really happens is if you just do business right, it works out for everybody. So it's good to see him out and really getting ahead with that. Because when we first opened Tiki Beach, I think he was really freaking out over it, trying to do the same thing that I was. It takes a lot out of you.
Well, that's the only bummer part is as soon as Tiki Beach opened, which for all of you out there, Tiki Beach is Neil Hutchinson's kite school. It's located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and it's just an incredibly beautiful location. It's like if you think of Fort Lauderdale and you think of all the hotels and all the condos right on the beach, he's right there, and he's got a full concession there. And so he launched this thing. He took it over from what did Chris call it? Kite Surf USA. It was formerly Kite Surf USA, but he took it over, and ever since he's taken it over, man, I barely can get a hold of him, and he's just MIA, which means he's working, and he's working really hard. But I hear he's doing very well. Every time I talk to him, he told me he had a really good season, so that's always good to hear. And actually, I just got Marina chimed in, and I've got to add in the Kite House is down in Key West. They're part of the event that's going on down there, so it's good to see though he's breaking away and getting down there and helping these guys out with that event, because Neil really knows how to run an event down there. So there's a question. Job of it, There's a question coming in from the lounge, and it says, is it true that Dewey Beach has the oldest kiters around?
That's a great question. I think there's a bunch of people, not in this lounge, but in the other room, that are probably going to be looking around the corner in a minute, because I think they're listening to this. But yeah, Dewey has a lot of older kiters, and I would say in 60 plus age group, and they all rip. They're good kiters, so it's kind of funny when you come up here, and I have people come up in the parking lot, and they're like, God, if that person can do it, I can go kiting. And you don't realize these guys, they're pretty hardcore. They're out all year long. Only on the coldest of days, the people aren't out riding. So it's a great group, and it's really a fun group of people.
Well, and you know what? There's another question coming in from the lounge, and it's from a guy named Fuller WE. He says, with that picture of Dave, and he's talking about the picture that we used in the press release. It says, and it's a picture of Dave where he's all long-haired and glammed out. It says, with that picture of Dave, is he going to change the company name to H2 Hair?
When somebody posted that on a news group today, it was pretty funny. I started laughing. H2 Hair.
Well, Yeah, you know, and Dave, I haven't seen you in a long time, so I don't even know what you look like anymore, man. That's really bad. You're my friend, and I don't even know what you look like. But are you still busting the long blonde hair?
Yeah, it's still there. What's left of it?
What's left of it? Yeah, actually, that's really bad because my girlfriend today, we were out last weekend and some guy said, "Oh yeah, I saw you with some short bald guy," and I was like, "Am I the bald guy now?"
Oh no,
that sucks. But you know, that kind of stuff happens. But you know, why don't we talk a little bit about your local area, because I know that there's a lot of kiters in that area, and why don't you talk about the local spots around where your shop is?
I think the local area here, near my store is nice because we have that shallow water. It's also close to a lot of different places. You have D.C. here. You've got New Jersey people come here. Wilmington, Delaware, we have a lot of people from. Virginia, all around. And what's nice here, it's obviously a beach town. It's fun to be at in the summer. And there's lots of places to ride. Unfortunately, the crowds we're starting to get on a weekend, it can get pretty hectic. I mean, we've been getting, I've seen 50 kites laid out at our beach sometimes. For a long time, if you saw 10, you were surprised. So it's growing quite a bit. And there's other areas north of us. Lewis, Delaware is a really good place on a different direction wind. But you can bounce around and kind of kite everywhere here, which is fun. And you don't have to drive, forever to do it. The only problem is in the summer when we have, obviously the tourists and everybody here, the traffic's starting to get bad. So getting around is a little tougher. But riding conditions are good. There's, you can ride waves. You can ride flat water. If you know where to go, there are slicks and places you can go. And then you have Assateague, too, which is south of us. And Assateague's a great place to ride. We try not to send too many people there because they have, it's a state park, and we just don't want to send a lot of people there because it's a really nice natural resource that we'd like to keep that way and not mess up for kiting.
Well, and that's the problem. You can always send people down here to Texas, man. This place, I tell you, that I'm from California and San Diego where the wind is light. I moved down here to Corpus Christi, and I'm telling you, this place is so wide open. Today it was windy as heck, and there was no kiters. I mean, there was kiters kiting, but there was no kiters. We never get that. And you got to be careful what you wish for. Like you said, we were happy to see 10 kiters, and now you see 50 kiters. I mean, some days I long for the days to where you can have some kiting community around. So yeah, I understand though that you definitely don't want the riffraff that goes along with it though.
Good and bad because our areas. It's not that we don't have a lot of area to ride; it's we don't have a lot of area to launch. We have small state parks; they fill up quickly, and then most of the other beach areas are pretty much private property. So you don't have a lot of areas to get in and out of it. And then, you have fishermen that use a certain area. You have a lot of, I wouldn't say there's rules, but there's just a lot of courtesy that you have to extend in order to do it right. And, every year we have more and more people, obviously hitting somebody with their kite or, just something going awry, which is happening everywhere, which, the more people we get into the sport, the more it's going to happen. But so we just, we try and do the best we can to keep things from happening, but there's always going to be those incidences.
Well, and here's another question coming out of the lounge. Do you know anything about this big downwinder in New Jersey in May?
I don't. I know that Patrick is doing it. I saw a little bit about it. I think they're actually going from Cape May north, and they're doing it in separate legs. So I guess if it's good for, a certain day, they'll hit that spot, get as far as they can, then they'll call it off and do it the next wind they get. They'll keep doing it. But I don't exactly know the whole gig on it yet.
So this, when are you heading out to Hatteras?
I'm going to head out early in the morning.
And so you'll be down there hanging out with the real kiteboarding crew, and they're doing the grand opening of the grand opening of their new shop, correct?
Well, no, the new shop's not there yet. What they do is every year they have kind of a customer appreciation grand opening season, starter type party, and they have some sales going on. They have, big giveaways. It's a really fun thing, and I think they're hitting it really well this time, so I think we're going to have really nice weather for it. So I think a lot of people take off and get down there.
Yeah, those guys are doing an awesome job, and I know you've known the Matt and Tripp since they were just operating out a Tripp's van in a little trailer. So
I've known Tripp for 20 years. I mean, we've gone back and forth with. He used to be my rep when I was in the windsurfing business, and he'd come and sell me north at that time. Then years later, we were competitors. We worked for the same company, and he was with North, I was with Naish, and we were both selling windsurfing stuff. And then we got into kiting, and we were competing reps. Then he opened a shop, and I was selling to him, and I opened a shop, and he was selling to me.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Trip Foreman and Matt Nuzzo, they're both co-founders of Real Kiteboarding. Probably, I would say, the biggest kiteboarding shop and school in the world.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
safe to say. I think those guys have done an incredible job. They've been featured in every magazine you can imagine, every newspaper, every television show. They've done a really incredible job, and so that's cool. So you're going down to kick off the season with them. The reason why I said, are you open up their new shop, because I heard that they're just planning this monster shop down there. So yeah,
they're in the process right now, I think, of getting everything together to start construction on it. But it should be a beautiful place. If you haven't seen their property already down there, Real Kiteboarding, it's just a beautiful spot down there. They've really taken the time to make it nice and make it first class. So when people go to, do clinics or, take lessons there, you have all the amenities to do it right. And what they're trying to do is make that even, stronger and have a place where you can stay. They're going to have, I think, condos there, a beautiful shop and all that. So they're really planning for the future, which they've been doing for a while. They take advantage of the opportunities, but they work really hard at it.
Yes, they do, and those guys, I know that they take heat, but they take a lot of heat. Sometimes it's tough being at the top, but they do run a first-class operation. And for anybody who is looking for that full kite experience, they run one of the most legitimate, like, outward bound style of schools. I don't know if any of you are familiar with outward bound, but they did the climbing and ropes courses. But they're kind of at that level of organization with their school. They have real intensive camps, and no, this is not a Real Kiteboarding infomercial. It's just I'm really impressed with what they've done for the sport of kiteboarding.
Well, I look at it with my shop, H2 Air, it's like I'm just the opposite. I want to be as small as possible and as efficient as I can, but I want to be able to lock my door and leave when I want to.
Exactly.
I don't even have regular store hours. It's like I want to go out, hang out with the people, go ride, do lessons, and not have that store as an ankle chain.
No, and I agree with you there. I know people ask me about South Coast, and I say, well, we're just more of a boutique kite school. We focus on, we're not into. I mean, if you're looking to go take your whole business over, and you're looking to take your whole family and put them all into camps, I mean, that's a great place to go. But yeah, I want to go kiteboarding myself. I can't. That's why we do this, right, Dave?
Well, no. If you teach lessons, you won't go kiteboarding anymore.
Oh, and you know who I have? I have working and living in, because we have a compound down here, and I live on the upstairs, and then I have Zach Kleppe. He's holding down the fort downstairs, and he's the main coach, and he manages the South Coast Kiteboarding. And
Kleppe, that's awesome.
Yeah, actually, last week I had the whole Kleppe clan in town. I had Sue, Zach, Ben, and even Kelsey. Man, Kelsey's she turned 15, and it's amazing because I know you've seen it too. You've watched a lot of these people grow up. I mean, you've watched even me. I'd say you've watched me grow up.
Well, it's funny because the Kleps, they were some of our first, I'd say, our youngest Slingshot kids, and they've been such loyal guys, since the beginning. And they were, I can remember Ben was 10 or so, I think, 10 or 11, I think, when he first started riding. If I'm right, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Look at those kids and the size of them now; it blows your mind.
Oh, Ben's like 6'3", and he's going to prom, and I look at these kids and I feel old. I really do. I'm like, gosh, man, I remember when you'd hide behind your mom's leg because you were too shy to even talk to me, Ben.
Funny.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, Marina chimed in and she said, "Well, let's not forget North Carolina. We got Hunter Brown's shop. There's a lot of shops in North Carolina. It's not only about Real Kiteboarding. So, yeah, you got Kiteboarding Hatteras. You know some of the shops. Maybe you could throw some.
Something that's kind of cool about that is I have a lot of communication with all these shops, and that's one of the things that was really good with me in the beginning. Is when I did go out on the road, I already knew everybody. I knew all the shops. I had good relationships with them. I talked to Hunter still. Hunter and I just talked a couple weeks ago, and we, shoot the shit back and forth. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I'm really lucky to have that relationship with, I'd say, 90% of the shops on the East Coast, almost to the point where when somebody will call me, checking a price or something, they're trying to beat a price, and they call me up, and, if they're from a certain area, say they're up in Cape Cod, and they just walked into the kite site and they looked at a board and they're calling me to get a better price. And I'm in Delaware. I'm like, why didn't you buy it from the shop up there? I don't mention the name, but I generally just know who's there. And I usually steer them right back in the shop they left and just explain to them, here's the deal. Why don't you just get it from your local area, from your local shop? And some of the excuses that come up are pretty funny because sometimes people just don't ask or they don't know what's going on in the store, or they don't say, hey, can you do the same deal? Or not even the same deal. What am I going to get if I buy this and I spend a little more money on it? And with the kite shops right now, it's very competitive. It's a tough business, more competitive than most people even realize. But we don't want you to walk out of the shop. We want to make our deals. We want to keep you there. But also, I don't want to take business from somebody that's, in order, like my website says. You're, billion miles away from me. Don't call me up and try and get cheaper stuff than the guy right next to you. It's crazy.
No, I agree with that, too. You got to support your local shop.
Yeah, I'm finding a lot of the new guys trying to get in this, they don't last because they don't realize the reality of what's going on with this business. They'll get in, you see a lot of shops try and open up, and they last, 3 or 4 months, and they just lose interest because they realize how hard it actually is to do.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's a very small industry, and everybody does know everybody. I mean, if you've been in it long enough, and especially in the United States, everybody knows everybody, so... Yeah, well, Dave, it's been great talking to you. I wish you the best of luck, H2Air, and all of the different things you're working on. Why don't you give us some websites where people can come and check you out?
Basically, check out Slingshot's site, of course, which is sskiteboarding.com for any of the Slingshot stuff we have going on. For my shop, it's h2air.com. Which is the letter H, the number 2.
Yeah, I was going to say, you got to spell it out, man.
What's that?
I said I was going to say, you better spell that one out.
Yeah, H2Air. It's only five words, basically, or letters. But no, people are funny. They have a hard time figuring that out, but it's just H2Air. I also have another thing going on where we're starting to do kite tests with people up and down the coast and in the local area here. It's called kiteboardtest.com. Right now it's going to be a forum, which is kiteboardtest.com/forum, and we'll have kite tests on there with a lot of different manufacturers.
Oh, that'll be interesting. You got to keep me in the loop on that. I'd love to give that some editorial, some love. I'm sure the manufacturers will hate me for it.
Good riders, there's new riders, there's just insane riders, and I want to try and get a balance of all these different people and get some input. What do you think of the kite? First impression right off the water. What do you think of the kite? Because a lot of times there's certain kites, you'll ride and in 2 seconds you'll love it. Another one, it takes you 3 or 4 days to like it. So your initial impression is like, I don't know. And once you dial into it, you're like, oh my God, this thing's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Phantom just posted your link in the lounge. So the link is active in the lounge, folks. Kiteboardtest.com. Well, Dave, have fun down there in Hatteras. Tell the real kiteboarding boys I said hello. Stop by Kiteboarding Hatteras if you have a chance. Tell them I said hello. Stop by Fox even. All the shops in North Carolina who keep Cape Hatteras going.
Barton.
What's that?
Don't forget Barton.
Oh yeah, that's what. I'm sorry. That's like one of the oldest shops there, isn't it?
Yeah, Barton's great, man.
Yeah, and there's so many people that really do work hard to make a living in this sport, and I always hate it because we tend to talk about the people that we know the best, but there's so many great people out there who are making kiteboarding happen and providing lessons and providing gear for people. And as Dave said, don't be scared to go into your local shop and say, hey, I want to support you, but if I'm going to support you, I need it to be like, fair on my pocketbook, because you'll see a lot of these local shops, they'll work with you just to get your business, and you brought up a very good point tonight, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me on the show. Tell everybody I said thanks.
Yeah, like I said, you have a big following out there. You really do. Actually, people have requested that I needed to get you on the show, and whenever you're going to be doing something new and crazy or even if we want to come and talk more about kitetest.com or kitetest.com, I would love to do that. And also too, you better tell Spunky I said hello.
I will certainly do that.
Ryan Riccatelli from asnews.net and the Kiteboarder Mag says hello. I miss her. She's awesome, and give her a big hug. And like I said, tell everyone I said what's up. And hopefully, I'll talk to Neil before you talk to him, because it sounds like you have a crazy weekend going on. And yeah, hopefully, you'll end up in one piece.
I hope so.
Well, all right, man. This will be. This will go online. Probably it'll be on later tonight, and it'll be on iTunes tomorrow. And actually, for all of you people out there who listen to this show, got to make an announcement. We actually had to move our subscription feed. So the old feed will not work. You're going to have to resubscribe to the new feed. I apologize about that. It was just a technical thing that we had to do. One of our servers, we were changing servers, and so for all the people who are fans of asnews.net and the Kiteboarder magazine podcast, yeah, it's a real simple switch, but you'll never ever have to resubscribe again. So I apologize about that. You listen to our show, don't you, Dave?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, Neil told me that. I was like, really? Loop listens to me?
It's good stuff on it, so.
Awesome, dude. Well, have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, folks, that concludes webcast podcast number 70. I can't believe we made it to 70, and like I said, please go and resubscribe to the new feed. You won't really notice a difference, but we had to move our servers, so you're going to have to resubscribe or you will not get our podcast. You'll be emailing us saying, why aren't I able to download a new podcast? Also, just want to give a heads up, we've got the Velocity Games. Velocity Games is dropping $15,000 on prize money. There's going to be a freestyle event, there's going to be a border cross, and there's going to be a traditional course racing event. So it's down here in Corpus Christi, Texas. You can find out more information at velocitygames.us. So anyway, thanks to everybody for supporting the show. If you want to help us out, you can buy a subscription to the magazine. You can do that at thekiteboarder.com, or you can buy a t-shirt or a DVD. Thekiteboarder.com, we have a store that basically has all kinds of cool stuff in there, and all the proceeds to that help us fund the Kiteboarder magazine and to help keep this show going. So everybody, thanks for tuning in week after week, and hopefully you'll remember to resubscribe. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, well, no, yeah.